There are programs inside government that don't officially exist. They don't appear in public budgets. They aren't acknowledged in congressional hearings. And in many cases, even senior officials don't know they exist. These are not just classified programs, they are unacknowledged programs. And if the claims are true, they may represent a hidden system of power, funding, and control operating alongside the visible government, completely out of public view. Because when whistleblowers speak about UFOs, they don't just describe objects in the sky, they describe something else, something deeper, a structure, a system, a compartment so tightly controlled that access isn't determined by rank, but by invitation. And once you're inside, you don't talk about it, not because it's illegal, but because it's designed so that no one outside can even prove it exists. So tonight, we're asking a different question. Not just what are UAPs, but where would the truth be hidden if it was never meant to be found? Welcome back to UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Project. This is Matt Tones, your host. Thank you for joining in. Today's episode is titled Unacknowledged Programs, the Secret System Hidden Inside Government, Special Access Programs Explained. To understand this conversation, we need to start with something real, something documented, something official. Because despite all the speculation, special access programs, or SAPs, are not conspiracy theory. They are a recognized part of the US national security system. Special access programs exist to protect the most sensitive operations in government, programs involving advanced weapons, intelligence capabilities, and technologies that, if exposed, could compromise national security. These programs go beyond standard classification. They don't just require clearance, they require specific access. Even if you hold the highest levels of clearance, top secret, you still don't automatically gain entry. You must be read into the program. And if you're not, the program doesn't exist to you. At a basic level, special access programs fall into three categories. Acknowledged SAPs, these exist publicly, but details are restricted. People know the program exists, but not what it does. Unacknowledged SAPs, these are different. Their existence is classified, not just the details, the entire program. If you're not read in, you're told nothing. Waived special access programs, the most restricted categories. These are so sensitive that even congressional oversight is limited. Only a small group of individuals, often referred to as the Gang of Eight, are briefed, and even then, information can be tightly controlled. Now, here's the key distinction, the critical point. A classified program protects information. An unacknowledged program protects existence itself. And that changes everything, because if a program is unacknowledged, you can't request information about it. You can't audit it. You can't investigate it because officially it's not there. Now, this is where the conversation shifts because in recent years, multiple whistleblowers have pointed to one specific claim that UFO-related programs are not just classified, they are hidden within unacknowledged special access programs. This isn't a fringe idea anymore. It's been stated under oath, most notably by David Grusch, a former intelligence officer who worked within the UAP task force. Grusch didn't just claim the existence of UFO programs, he claimed something more significant, that these claims operate outside normal oversight channels, that they are compartmentalized to the point where even those tasked with investigating UAPs couldn't access them. And that raises a serious question. If true, who controls these programs? In theory, special access programs are still accountable. They are funded through government budgets. They are overseen by select members of Congress. They operate within legal frameworks. But unacknowledged programs introduce a problem because the fewer people who know about something, the harder it is to oversee. And oversight relies on visibility. So, what happens when visibility is removed? The answers lie in one word: compartmentalisation. Information is broken into pieces. Each piece is held by a different group. No single person sees the entire system. This structure is intentional. It protects against leaks, it protects against espionage, but it also creates a situation where no one fully understands what exists. And that's where concerns begin. Some insiders have described something beyond special access programs, not just programs, but an entire ecosystem, a network of private contractors, intelligence agencies, and defense organizations operating in coordination, funded through mechanisms that are difficult to trace, shielded by classification layers that prevent scrutiny. This is often referred to as the unacknowledged system. And within that system, according to claims, are programs focused on reverse engineering unknown technologies, studying anomalous materials, and investigating non-human intelligence possibilities. Now, to be clear, there is no publicly verified evidence that confirms these specific activities, but the structure that could support them does exist. If such a program were real, they would require funding. And this brings us back to something we explored previously, the black budget, because unacknowledged programs don't appear as line items. They are buried within larger allocations, distributed across departments, hidden inside legitimate programs, which makes tracking them almost impossible. Now, here's where this becomes important. Even without UFOs, this system makes sense because governments need a way to protect breakthrough technologies, intelligence capabilities, and strategic advantages. And the more advanced the technology, the greater the need for secrecy. So the structure exists for a reason. The question is not whether SAPs exist, they do. The question is what has been placed inside them. Because once you understand the structure, the funding, and the lack of visibility, the next question becomes unavoidable. If something extraordinary was discovered, would this be the place to hide it? And more importantly, would anyone outside ever know? When you step back and look at the broader UAP conversation, a pattern begins to emerge. Not a single claim, not a single source, but a consistent structure of testimony. Different individuals, different agencies, different decades. And yet they describe something remarkably similar: restricted access, compartmentalized information, programs hidden within programs, and most importantly, a system that prevents full visibility even from within. The most significant modern example of this comes from David Grusch, a former intelligence officer assigned to investigate UAP programs at an official level. Grusch wasn't an outsider. He wasn't speculating. He was operating inside the system with the authority to access classified information. And according to his testimony, he encountered something unexpected, not just resistance, but denial of access. Grusch stated that when he attempted to investigate certain programs, he was told he did not have the clearance, not because his clearance was too low, but because the programs were compartmentalized beyond his reach. This is a critical distinction because it suggests something unusual, not just secrecy, but layered secrecy within secrecy, a structure where even authorized investigators cannot see the full picture. If true, this creates a paradox. A government task force assigned to investigate UAPs, unable to access the very programs where the most sensitive information may exist. And that leads to a fundamental question. Is the system designed to protect information or to prevent discovery. Now we move into even more complex territory because multiple claims, not just from Grusch, but from others, point to something else, that certain programs are not held directly by government agencies, but by private contractors. At first glance, this might not seem unusual. Governments frequently outsource work. Defense contractors develop technology. They build aircraft. They manage advanced systems. But in the context of SAPs, this creates a unique situation because private entities operate under different rules, different oversight structures, different disclosure requirements, and critically, different levels of accountability. If a program is housed within a private contractor, it becomes even harder to access, even harder to audit, even harder to expose, because now the information isn't just classified, it's contractually protected, and that adds another layer of insulation. According to whistleblower allegations, some of the most sensitive UAP-related programs are held within these contractor environments, shielded from traditional oversight, protected by legal frameworks, and accessible only to those with both clearance and direct program inclusion. Now, again, this is where we need to remain precise. There is no publicly verified evidence that confirms specific UFO-related programs exist within contractors, but the structure that would allow it absolutely does exist, and that's the critical point. Now we reach one of the most important questions in this entire discussion. Where is the line between legitimate secrecy and something else? Governments have the right to protect sensitive information. This includes national defense systems, intelligence operations, emerging technologies. Special access programs exist for this reason. They are legal, they are structured, they are necessary. But concerns begin when secrecy avoids oversight, circumvents reporting requirements, and operates without accountability. Because at that point, the system is no longer just protecting information, it may be protecting itself. And this is the real tension, not whether secrecy exists, but whether it has expanded beyond its intended boundaries. To understand how this could happen, we need to look at history, because none of this is entirely new. During World War II, the United States developed the atomic bomb under extreme secrecy. The Manhattan Project involved over 100,000 personnel, multiple locations, total compartmentalisation, and yet most people involved had no idea what they were working on. This demonstrates something critical. A system can exist at massive scale without widespread awareness because information is controlled at every level. Now apply that logic to modern systems. More advanced technology, more sophisticated compartmentalization, greater reliance on contractors. It becomes easier, not harder, to maintain secrecy. And this brings us to where we are today, because despite decades of sightings, despite military encounters, despite official acknowledgements that UAPs exist, there is still a gap, a significant gap, between what is observed and what is explained. We know that UAPs have been tracked on radar, pilots have encountered them, governments have investigated them, and yet no definitive explanation has been publicly confirmed. We don't know what these objects are, where they originate, or how they operate. And more importantly, we don't know what information may exist inside restricted systems. So now we arrive at the central question of this episode. Not are UFOs real, but if definitive information existed, where would it be? Based on everything we've explored, it would not be in public records or reports. It would not be widely accessible. It would be highly classified, deeply compartmentalized, and restricted to a very small group. In other words, exactly where special access programs operate. And this is where we need to draw a clear line, because beyond this point, we move from structure into speculation. We can confirm special access programs exist. Unacknowledged programs exist. Compartmentalisation is real. Oversight is limited in certain cases. We cannot confirm that UFO technologies are being reverse engineered, that non-human intelligence has been recovered, that hidden programs contain definitive answers. These remain claims, not established facts. So what does all of this actually mean? There are three realistic interpretations. One, the system is functioning as intended. Everything we've discussed exists, but it's being used correctly to protect national security, to maintain strategic advantage, and the lack of transparency is simply the cost of that protection. Number two, the system has expanded beyond control. Secrecy has grown, compartmentalisation has increased, oversight has weakened, and certain programs now operate with limited accountability. Number three, the system contains something significant, not proven, but possible, that within these structures there are discoveries that have not been disclosed. And this is the real takeaway now. Here's the most important point. Regardless of which possibility is true, the structure itself is real, and it is designed to do one thing extremely well: control information. So when we ask, why don't we have answers about UFOs, we may be asking the wrong question, because the better question is, where would those answers be kept if they were never meant to be public? And until that question is resolved, the gap between what we see and what we know will remain. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Matt Tones. Please subscribe, share, and tell your mum about the episode.